Hey, what's up everybody? Chad Calek here, and welcome back to the In a Crowded Room podcast. We have a lot to discuss because some big things are going on out here in Hollywood, and it appears like a lot of things are about to be exposed out here by a couple of fellas that are banding together, Mr. Mel Gibson and Ashton Kutcher. But before we dive headfirst into that, really quickly, I'll run through some updates for you guys. You know, one of the good things, I guess, about the silver lining of being kind of sidelined with an injury or a hospitalization, you have so much time to think about how to tighten things up and improve what we do. So what's really cool about jumping back into life now is I've had the time to do that. And there are different areas that we're going to be focusing on a lot more and to make them a lot better. Specifically, we're going to put a lot more time and effort into this channel and our Patreon page. And in my research for Harbingers, I came across a ton of footage dating all the way back to 1994. Footage of paranormal investigations, 35-inch Mutter footage from back in the day, a ton of music that hasn't been released, deleted scenes, behind-the-scenes footage from all the films that we've done, tons of footage from the road, and I found a ton of old tapes from filming Paranormal State. Really cool stuff that was amazing to watch. All of that stuff is here. We're going to call it From the AGH Vault, so when you see that, you know something's coming from the past. Starting literally this weekend for my Patreon supporters, you're going to see exclusive new video, new content, updated weekly on our Patreon page. And starting next week on this main channel, we'll be making a lot more of these From the AGH Vault video uploads as well. So having said all of that, my friends, if you have not checked out our Patreon page and you want to check it out, thank you in advance. You can click the link to our Patreon page below in the description box. And if you are not a subscriber to this channel, please click the subscribe button as well as the notifications bell to make sure you know every single time that I drop a new podcast. Also, I want to congratulate all of you because together we are over 14,000 subscribers to this podcast right now, which I cannot thank you guys enough. Also, just so you guys know this, over the past 8 months in which I was, dreadfully ill, the podcast actually grew by close to 2,000 subs, which is amazing that you guys continued to support. Just means a lot to me. I know a lot of people say they have the best fan base in the world. I truly believe that. You have demonstrated over and over again that you are there for me. It means the world to me. At this stage of my recovery, it feels like I'm re-entering the game of life, and not working on, lifting my head up or learning how to walk again, to actually spend my time doing what I love and, giving you guys what I love to share with you, which is stories and movies and music and photography, all those things that are a big part of my reason for existing. So I love that we're here. Now let's get into this. Hollywood, Hollywood, Hollywood. I think things are about to get very, very interesting around here. Jim Caviezel, the actor who played Jesus Christ in Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ, is in a new movie that is released theatrically right now called The Sound of Freedom. In fact, it is the #1 movie at the box office in the country. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but right now, Hollywood is starving for content. And a lot of that was the fallout from COVID. When productions were shut down, there was just nothing being made. And the Hollywood studio system, it doesn't exist without content. And that was honestly one of the best things that happened, because studios were forced to understand and accept that you aren't the power holder in this game anymore. There are other games in town of distribution like YouTube, Vimeo, iTunes. There's a lot of avenues. And even those distributors know that, the power in this town comes from the ability to create on a budget and own, in perpetuity, the projects that are out there. Because of COVID, there just wasn't enough content to feed the machine. And now that we've gone to a distribution format that are app-based, right? By nature of the current climate of the world, people want things faster. There's less patience, right? That's why you see Netflix releasing so many projects at once and doing hardly any promotion, which I think is a major mistake on their end. But they hardly do any promotion because that's usually where studios lose money. Like, I'm talking about traditionally, right? Go back 20 years. When a studio spends, $5 million, $10 million on a picture, which would be very low for a Hollywood budget, they will spend 3 to 4 times that amount marketing the film. And when you spend, like Titanic was the first $100 million picture, James Cameron's Titanic, they spent well over that to market the film, which is why it was everywhere that year. Now, in today's world, people just don't have that attention, the attention span for new projects, and it becomes harder and harder to stand out through things like CGI and special effects because they've all advanced so much. So what becomes really valuable to Hollywood is a studio or a filmmaker that can produce a quality picture, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, for a budget that makes sense. So you can do a minimal amount of marketing. And if it takes off, then, you win big, right? You win big. So what Hollywood wants right now, more than anything, is indie films that crack it big, right? The Sound of Freedom, starring Jim Caviezel, big name, big Hollywood name, is doing great. #1 film in the theaters. And for some reason, every major distributor, they have all declined to carry that film. The controversy comes from the fact that the film is about child trafficking, specifically child sex trafficking. And I have not seen the movie, but it reveals that Hollywood, the who's who that run this town, the film reveals that they have a big hand in it, that they are involved in it. Now, what's really weird is The Sound of Freedom isn't really receiving any criticism from the distributors, other than, supposedly, the storyline has ties to QAnon. But this should not matter because The Sound of Freedom is not a documentary. It is loosely based off the life of a real individual, but again, it's a fictional piece. It's not a documentary. Now, for those of you familiar with QAnon, you might be saying, well, what does that have to do with Hollywood? That was a radical online group that supported Donald Trump. Well, there's only so many systems and organizations that affect our political system. There's the religious right, there's Wall Street, there's Big Pharma, but a major player in our political system is Hollywood. And if you don't believe that, check out the documentary about David Geffen, and you could see how his support for Bill Clinton went sideways when Bill Clinton screwed over David Geffen and didn't keep one of his promises to help get him into office, in which Geffen turned around and pledged his support to Barack Obama, in which he told him when he met him, "Young man, you are going to be the next president of the United States." And that happened. Out of nowhere, Barack Obama surged, to the presidency. And a big reason for that was his support from Hollywood. So if the film is criticizing, the upper levels of Hollywood and stating that they are involved in human trafficking, so if this film is alleging that there's human trafficking that's being controlled by the, upper levels of Hollywood, that's the same thing as the upper levels of our political system. They all say that's not their reason for not carrying the picture, but they don't give one. Beyond the fact that any studio has a right to just say, we're not carrying that picture. But what's really weird is if you guys go on, Amazon right now or Hulu and look at the new releases, it's garbage. I mean, it's like shit you've never heard of. Terrible, like low budget horror films, documentaries you've never heard of, people starring in films you've never heard of. And that's because they're hurting so bad for content they have to release something. So why on earth wouldn't you want to release, if you're one of these studios, a film starring Jim Caviezel that is killing it in the theaters at a time where theaters just don't kill it? They don't make money right now. Very few films even get a theatrical run anymore because it costs too much to put them in, costs too much to market them. But The Sound of Freedom is making money. Like, they're in the black. They're killing it. But they can't find a digital distributor. So why would Hollywood want to make sure that this film doesn't reach the masses at large? Why? You can guess why, right? I mean, it's probably hitting a little too close to home. And there are certain people that, obviously don't want their name, to be out there or insinuated, right? If you're part of the system that's involved with human trafficking, which we'll talk about in a second, the stupidest move, I think, is what they're doing right now. The boycotting of this film. Like I said, that's a giant red flag that's saying, basically, look into us, investigate us, Well, when this first happened, Jim Caviezel wasted no time, speaking out about this. Just saying, this is insane. This is BS. Now, it's a fictional film, but it is written off the life story of a real guy that, again, I haven't seen it, so I don't want to try to pretend like I know everything that's in it. But I know it involves this guy that was working for, one of either the CIA, FBI, like one of the government organizations that cracks down on human trafficking. And basically, he saw that there is intercorruption within the U.S. and within, Hollywood and other political systems. And he started realizing that the only way he could really help to save these kids was to get out of the system that he was in and do this on his own. So that's kind of the story. Well, once, all these companies were saying no and it became obvious that the film had been blackballed, Jim Caviezel started speaking out about it. The film also has Mira Sorvino in it as well. And she started speaking about it, and the director started speaking about it. And obviously, it didn't take long for Jim Caviezel to call up his old friend, the director of The Passion of the Christ, Mel Gibson, and started sharing with Mel what was going on, in which Mel Gibson watched the film and, just came out on fire about it. Now, Mel Gibson is a strange guy. He is a weird guy that has a very checkered past. he's, went on these anti-Semitic rants, and he's had his issues with women that he was threatening in conversations that were leaked, and he's been, quote, canceled, right? A couple times, very early on. But he's also done some incredible things. When he made The Passion of the Christ, that was completely funded with his own money. And we're talking millions and millions of dollars, I think the budget for The Passion of the Christ was, I think it was somewhere around 115 million or 100 million, something like that. But it made back independently, theatrically, it made back over $400 million, which is mind-blowing for an independent film. And that's when he became a serious power in this town. And if you know anything about Hollywood, there's a definite dividing line between the money you can make and the power that you can obtain. And that line is when you step from in front of the camera to behind the camera. As far as power goes, it just makes sense, right? If you have the public and you're famous, that's great. But again, you can strip that and take that away from somebody. We see it with cancel culture all the time, right? So like Mel Gibson, for example, say he does Lethal Weapon, use that as an example. He does Lethal Weapon, he gets his, $10 million to do that film. He's famous, and because of his fame, he has other opportunities to do other films. But the studio and the executive producer or the director that owns points on the film, that's their ownership forever. Forever, right? That's never going away unless they get rid of it. The actor, if he does something stupid to basically become, like this sad story of somebody who lost it all, or if he gets drunk and kills somebody in a car, or he release some phone call where he's threatening some girl, whatever, and you strip that away from him, then, the opportunities can dry up and you're suddenly unemployable. But again, had Mel Gibson owned all the films that he did, wouldn't really matter. I mean, he's just going to keep making money no matter what. We've proven as a culture, if the art is incredible, rarely do we care about the personal decisions that are made by the artist. I mean, you have to do something really, really, really bad that's provable, that's demonstrative and provable to make America, not care and not want to listen to you anymore and not want to see you anymore. Want proof? Chris Brown beat the living shit out of Rihanna. Chris Brown has a very, very solid career still. People listen to his music. They buy his new albums. He's acting. They see him in movies. America didn't give a shit. Michael Jackson, nothing was proven, right? As far as, stuff with kids and his infatuation with children. But he's been charged many times and has gone to court many times and tons of accusations. And there was never a time where people stopped listening to Michael Jackson. So to own the art is what I'm saying. That's where the power is. And Mel Gibson dealt with this. He saw this. He's been canceled a few times and keeps coming back. Well, because of that canceling of him, which he deems to be very unfair, and that, he believes that there was an exerted effort behind what would otherwise be called the Hollywood Illuminati to take him down. He believes in that. Now, we'll talk about that a little bit more later because I believe that's a very real thing. But Mel Gibson talks to Jim Caviezel and says, yeah, man, this shit will not stand. We can't let this we can't just take this one. Like, when they're going to blackball us for, you making this film and wanting, to release what you believe is the truth about it. And I love that this wasn't Mel Gibson's film per se, but he's got the back of his boy, Jim Caviezel. I love that about him. And also, he knows a lot of secrets in Hollywood, and he has been speaking out about this forever. And when I say secrets, I'm not talking about stuff like, oh, people in Hollywood do a lot of drugs and they fuck a lot. That's a given. He has spoken many times on a different level. We're talking about like a eternal battle between good and evil type of level. Like there's some seriously dark shit going on out here. In fact, I want you to watch this. This is an interview where he talks about the first time that he met Christopher Walken. Okay? I want you to watch this and just look at the way that he speaks about Chris Walken. You guys know who Christopher Walken is, right? If you don't, look at the screen. This is Christopher Walken. Check this interview out.
Christopher Walken, first time I ever did a casting session in America, terrified me.
Me too.
I mean, fucking hell. I came to meet the guy. They said, oh, he's flying in from God knows where.
Yeah, but he didn't need a plane, right?
Yeah, it's like he didn't need a plane. He came in. He was doing all the kind of Scorsese stuff, and I said, "Have you had a chance to read the script?" And he looked at me and he said, "Do you like my face?" And I went, "Yes." And he said, "Well, that's fucking great. Because if you don't, get De Niro. Fuck you, I'm out of here." And stood up and walked out. And everyone said, "Well, that I think was quite a good meeting."
No, he came to see me on a rooftop in New York. I said, "Hey, can I talk to you?" And he said, "Sure." And he floated in sideways through a crowd of people. He was wearing black. And it was like one of those old vampire movies where they don't walk but they glide. And he was a dancer, so he has he's very graceful.
Yeah.
And he moved sideways and he just sat down in a chair next to me. And it kind of frightened me. And he's a very smart guy. And we started talking, and I didn't, say much of anything about reading the script, nothing. I just started talking about the Middle Ages, and he began to talk tortures. And we swapped tortures, because I'd read this book on torture, and I tried to recall some of the most heinous things I'd ever read in this book, and he was like, oh, and he'd try and top it. And my assistant was there, and he left because he couldn't stand it anymore.
Yeah.
The air had turned cold. And then he left, and I wanted to leave. And because I knew that I didn't want to work with him.
Yeah.
And he was getting scary.
Yeah.
And then I turned around, and it was on top of the Peninsula Hotel. I turned around to avoid his steady gaze at one point, and I was looking at a building with the top of the sixes on it. So there was a huge illuminated triple six in red. Yeah. And I went from that to that to that, and he started smiling.
Look at the way he speaks about Christopher Walken. He talks about him as though he met either the devil or a demon. Right down to the point where he references the triple sixes. So he's letting us know, like he's talking about, yes, I am talking about Lucifer. And he's basically saying that Christopher Walken scared him. And the way he describes him floating sideways and how elegant he was. And he's publicly saying he didn't want to work with him. He didn't want to see him again. Now think of how much of an impact, him meeting Christopher Walken must have had for him at that time as a Hollywood actor to be speaking out against this legendary actor who's tied in with everybody from, De Niro, Keitel, like all the old OGs of Hollywood, you know what I mean? Very interesting, but we will come back to Mel Gibson in a second. The other guy I want to talk to you about is Ashton Kutcher. He is an Iowa boy, just like me. No, actually, I consider myself a Texas boy more than anything. I guess I was born in Florida, but I lived in Iowa a long time, and I know where Ashton's from. He's from the Cedar Rapids, which is one of those places where you can almost tell that there must be corruption there. Because in those small towns, and I picked up on this when I first moved to Persia, Iowa, and went to school and saw how many last names were similar. In those small towns like Cedar Rapids, everybody's related to everybody, man. Those places just breed nepotism. They just breed, we take care of our own. That's what I'm saying, basically. So Ashton was already from that type of environment. And he's had a weird history in Hollywood, too. Ashton Kutcher's very first audition ever, like audition number one, first one he ever did, because he was just a model. He was doing some modeling. He had gone to, I believe it was the Mall of America, which is in Minnesota, and there was a talent search going on. And people were invited to just stop by and just give their headshots and meet these talent scouts. And this happens a lot with talent agencies. They go out and just look at times. But what's wild is Kutcher gets signed to this agency, and immediately, just like out the gate, he gets a modeling deal with Calvin Klein. He becomes like the guy, the Calvin Klein guy. He's on billboards in like New York City and LA before he ever lands, any kind of acting gig. So he gets convinced that the move is LA. And it is. If you're a young actor, or model or musician, the move is LA. He comes out here, gets an agent locked up for television. And like I said, the first time he goes out, bang, he's on That 70s Show. One audition, the kid's batting 1,000. Just mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing. But you guys know That 70s Show goes on to become a massive success. And Ashton, begins to become a, huge name in Hollywood. And there's some weird things that happens to him early on. Not a lot of people know this story, but you can Google this and look it up. I think he was only like 22. He had a girlfriend. He had not been dating very long, but it was getting serious. It was starting to get serious, according to him. And, one night they had plans to go out for another normal night on the town, go get dinner, catch a flick, that type of thing. As he's going there, I think he left his wallet or something, and he stopped and turned around and basically left 5 minutes later than he had planned. And he shows up to this girl's apartment, and he finds her violently murdered. In the end, this girl was murdered by an aspiring actor who supposedly had no ties to Ashton either. I just only bring this up because he's just consistently been involved in just some weird scenarios. They're just odd. And I think it's because he inserts himself into some weird scenarios, which you'll see here in just a second. As you guys know, Ashton Kutcher was the castmate of this actor, Danny Masterson, who was just found guilty of raping 2 women and a possible third, in which he's now awaiting sentencing, and he's going to get 30 years at the minimum. It's 30 years to life is the range of his guilty sentence. Danny Masterson was a member of Scientology. And if you read into that case, It's really, really bizarre. It screams of sex trafficking. I don't want to talk about the detail. I'll probably get this podcast pulled if I did talk about the details of it. So Google it and read it for yourself. But it's super bizarre. Now, Kutcher is also a big tech guy, heavy into tech. He's also a big crypto guy. He's got millions and millions and millions of dollars wrapped in to a lot of different coins, Ripple being his baby. He really believes in Ripple. But he developed this software called Thorn. And this software, supposedly, I don't know how it works, but it scans the web and it picks up on tendencies and traits of pedophiles and people that are of a high likelihood to commit a sexual crime. And he was looking for funding, more funding, I should say, to further develop this software. Part of that process was just doing events and things that get the public name out there, in which Kutcher spoke to Congress about this Thorn software. I want you to watch this. This is really strange because at first I couldn't believe it when he said it. I had to rewind it and watch it. But it sounds like he was actively involved in FBI raids to shut down human trafficking cases. Check this footage out.
In a country that is riddled with bipartisan separation on so many things, slavery seems to come up as one of these issues that we can all agree upon. And I applaud you for your agreement, and I believe in you and your leadership and your ability to take us out of it. Now, this is about the time when I start talking about politics that the internet trolls tell me to stick to my day job. So I'd like to talk about my day job. My day job is as the chairman and the co-founder of Thorn. We build software to fight human trafficking and the sexual exploitation of children. And that's our core mission. My other day job is that of the father of two, a 2-month-old and a 2-year-old. And as part of that job that I take very seriously, I believe that it is my effort to defend their right to pursue happiness and to ensure a society and government that defends it as well. As part of my anti-trafficking work, I've met victims in Russia. I've met victims in India. I've met victims that have been trafficked from Mexico, victims in New York and New Jersey and all across our country. I've been on FBI raids where I've seen things that no person should ever see. I've seen video content of a child that's the same age as mine being raped by an American man that was a sex tourist in Cambodia. And this child was so conditioned by her environment that she thought she was engaging in play. I've been on the other end of a phone call from my team asking for my help because we had received a call from the Department of Homeland Security telling us that a 7-year-old girl was being sexually abused, and that content was being spread around the dark web. And she had been being abused, and they'd watched her for 3 years, and they could not find the perpetrator, asking us for help. We were the last line of defense. An actor and his foundation were the potential last line of defense. That's my day job, and I'm sticking to it.
Now, maybe I'm crazy, but doesn't it seem like absolute lunacy that Homeland Security or the FBI would be calling Ashton Kutcher to be an active part of a raid? Like to capture sex traffickers and pedophiles? Because he's not saying he knows of this or he's saying, I was present at a raid. That's crazy to me. If that's happening, yeah, I have more questions. How and why? but this just shows you his level of involvement. Now, again, here's another guy that has seen success at many, many different levels. He never quite broke through on the movie star level, but on the TV level, that 70s show was massive. And he's also executive produced tons of series and shows that have done well. He currently has a hit on Netflix as well. And as you guys know, he has his own children. He is, or was married to Demi Moore. It's again another odd scenario that he always seems to involve himself in. But the reason we're talking about him is because Ashton is also friends with Mel Gibson. And they just announced that they are teaming up to release basically an expose on Hollywood and what really goes on in this city. Not only with sex trafficking, but they said basically like everything that the public should know across the board. Which I'm certain there are executives here that are freaking out right now because these guys, they do know, the ins and outs of this business. And listen, even back then, just being around people that I would meet, you would hear rumors about all kinds of stuff from people. Like I heard jokes and things about Bill Cosby. People would always joke about him. You would hear that everywhere. Harvey Weinstein was another one. People they knew this about Weinstein. They all did. That was such a big deal that they were like telling jokes in the monologue at award. Think about that. What kind of culture would have to exist for a monster like Weinstein to have immunity for all those years? And what brought him down? It's not just, this, podcaster and this journalist interviewed some people. That's been done a million times. People have looked in, to his record, with women and accusations forever. And he always skated. He always walked. But this was different. Same with Bill Cosby. This time was different. You would think usually the longer and further you are removed from a crime, the better chance you have to not answer for that crime. And this was just the opposite with these guys. But there's tons of stories. I still hear today all the time. Even back then, when I first got here, my first kind of taste of Hollywood, it started out hearing just little secrets, about things. Now, years later, probably 2 years later, I've met quite a few people in this town, working and directing. Things are going good. And I start getting invited, to different parties and stuff. And I got invited to my first Hollywood Hills party. And everybody always says, hey, man, if you're going to the Hills, watch out for the vampires. And the Hollywood Vampires is like a nickname for basically bad people that are in Hollywood that will supposedly, quote, suck your lifeblood, right? At that time, I had met this guy, George, my friend George, who you all heard about as well. And George is born and raised here. I told him about it, and he looked so, just dead serious. Like right when I told him I was going to this party, he was just like, man, be careful, Chad. Be careful. Be careful. And I was like, why? And he started telling me these crazy stories of there's this director, again, I'm not going to say his name, but it has been echoed on TV. People have associated this guy, big time director, they've associated him with child trafficking and having parties where these kids are ushered in and him and his friends do whatever they want. If I knew anything factual, I'd go straight to the damn authorities. I don't know anything factual. I know that I've heard this from probably a dozen people, plus after hearing it, showed up on the news. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Rumors that were going around. And I'm like, that's wild. He told me about these stories of these parties in the hills called bug catcher parties, where basically a bunch of people with AIDS or HIV will go and have a party with the intention of infecting somebody who either does or does not want to be infected. But that's the purpose of these parties. I couldn't believe that, so I started doing a ton of research about it. Turns out it's a thing, and it started in San Francisco. And these bug catcher parties are real things. I actually ended up meeting a few people that had been present at these types of parties. And that's a fact. 2 people that I know told me they were at these parties when this happened, up in the hills. So crazy, crazy shit. And it's like, who are these powers that be that do this? You know, and then you got to go to the higher levels, I think, is where the real answer to all of this lies. And I was just talking with Thomas about this. Look, I've been fortunate. I think it's fortunate to be around people that have made $1 billion because you pick up traits, right? There's things you see that you can see why. But I know that a lot of the people that I meet at those levels, strange people, man. Strange people. And for the longest time, I couldn't kind of figure out why I kept hearing stories about really weird things like why were all those powerful people flying with Epstein? Why were they going to this island on the Lolita Express? And when Alex Jones broke in and filmed the footage to Bohemian Grove, I couldn't believe that was real when you look at all the names that went to this place. We're talking about presidents, like presidents of the United States, man. The head of industry. You know, you look on Epstein's Lolita Express, it's like Bill Clinton, Kevin Spacey, you know, all these powerful people. And I started realizing when I first got to Hollywood, I thought it was about money. I thought everyone's just trying to make the most money. And it's a big dick swinging session about who has the most cash. But I'm telling you, it's not about the money, because take a drive through Rodeo Drive, to the Palisades, through Malibu, through places in Santa Monica, go down to Dana Point, man, and like La Jolla, the Hollywood Hills, and you will see how many people got money. And it's a lot. And we're talking big money. You don't have to have that much money in the spectrum of things to buy everything you could ever want to buy. You know what I mean? There will come a time where you just bought all the shit you want to buy. I know people that are that wealthy and have done that. Once you've made all the trips you want to make and you own everything you want to own, you bought everything you wanted to buy, you've eaten every type of meal you ever wanted to eat. Like once you have all that, at some point, like if you're worth 20 billion, what could you not do unless you're worth 30 billion? The truly wealthy people in the world, you don't even know their names. They're ghosts. And you know what I mean? Like there's just so much money, it doesn't even matter. When I start realizing it's about power. And I don't mean power like I'm the president of this company. I mean power like I'll do whatever the fuck I want without any consequence at all, period. That's what they're chasing. That's why you get just weirdos like Epstein and like all these dudes that are like buying kids and doing this horrific things to them and just move on. You know, when Alex Jones broke into Bohemian Grove, they had this ceremony they do with Moloch, the owl god. This ceremony, it's called the cremation of care. The cremation of care. Think about what that is. During this ceremony, they burn, it's fake, but a fake child, like a baby, like an infant wrapped up. It's called the cremation of care. So basically they're eliminating their ability to care. That's what they were doing there. Eliminating their ability to care. Now, if that isn't evil, I don't know what is, man. That's what hit me out here that's scary, is it's not about money. They all have that. It's about who can truly do whatever they want. Who can become God-sized. The first time I realized that this was really real, and it kind of hit home to me, I had heard for years that Kevin Spacey, I heard he was gay, bisexual, whatever, which again, I thought if he thinks it's not good for his business, then whatever. It's his right to be private or not. But then I started hearing, well, people say he's like kind of a sick dude, you know, and I was just like, Kevin Spacey? I fucking love Kevin Spacey. You kidding me? Especially at that time, I was, watching his show on Netflix where he's the president. What was the name of that character? Francis Underwood. He played this incredibly selfish politician that lacked the ability to really care about anybody but himself. So during this Netflix run, it comes out that Kevin Spacey is being accused by 3 people of sexual assault. I had also heard rumors that Kevin Spacey was like one of the most powerful men in Hollywood, which was rare because he was an actor. And again, these are just rumors that I'm hearing, so I can't confirm any of it, but this comes out, this Kevin Spacey stuff comes out. Suddenly, there's all these charges in the paper, and I'm reading these, court files about what's being said, and I'm thinking, Jesus, man, this is serious. Like, he can do real time. There hasn't been any kind of plea deal. And a normal person at that time, their attorney would be like, yo, man, we're going into trial. Our game plan, buckled up. You be quiet. Don't do anything to make this bad for us. Now, remember, if found guilty, he can do many, many years in prison. We're talking, like I said, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, a lot. Knowing that, out of the blue, Spacey comes out with this video in which he's portraying the character of Francis Underwood. Check it out.
You didn't really think I was going to miss the opportunity to wish you a Merry Christmas, did you? It's been a pretty good year, and I'm grateful to have my health back. And in light of that, I've made some changes in my life, and I'd like to invite you to join me. As we walk into 2020, I want to cast my vote for more good in this world.
Ah, yes, I know what you're thinking. Can he be serious?
I'm dead serious. And it's not that hard, trust me. The next time someone does something you don't like, you can go on the attack, but you can also hold your fire and do the unexpected. You can kill them with kindness.
Now, only hours after he releases this video, only hours, his accuser, whose name was Ari Bain, commits suicide. Now remember, there are 2 other accusers as well, okay? Really kind of odd stories. One accuser that he has is named Linda Culkin. She actually was a nurse that was taking care of another guy who claimed that Kevin Spacey sexually assaulted him. She hears this story from this guy saying this and has a really bizarre reaction. She starts to stalk Kevin Spacey and also leave death threats and shit like that. And she also accuses him of committing, these crimes. He also countersues her for death threats and all this stuff. That's one of the cases going on. And the other one, no one knows who it is because the person remained anonymous. Shortly after the death of the first guy, Ari Bain, 1 month before he's supposed to begin his trial with this anonymous accuser, he puts out another video, which is this one.
I know what you want. Oh, sure, they may have tried to separate us, but what we have is too strong, it's too powerful. I mean, after all, we shared everything, you and I. I told you my deepest, darkest secrets. I showed you exactly what people are capable of. I shocked you with my honesty, but mostly I challenged you and made you think. And you trusted me, even though you knew you shouldn't. So we're not done, no matter what anyone says. And besides, I know what you want. You want me back. Of course, some believed everything and had just been waiting with bated breath to hear me confess it all. They're just dying to have me declare that everything said is true and that I got what I deserved. Wouldn't that be easy if it was all so simple? Only you and I both know it's never that simple, not in politics and not in life. But you wouldn't believe the worst without evidence, would you? You wouldn't rush to judgments without facts, would you? Did you? No, not you. You're smarter than that. Anyway, all this presumption made for such an unsatisfying ending, and to think it could have been such a memorable send-off. I mean, if you and I have learned nothing else these past years, it's that in life and art, nothing should be off the table. We weren't afraid, not of what we said and not of what we did, and we're still not afraid. Because I can promise you this. If I didn't pay the price for the things we both know I did do, I'm certainly not going to pay the price for the things I didn't do. Oh, of course, they're going to say I'm being disrespectful, not playing by the rules, like I ever played by anyone's rules before. I never did, and you loved it. Anyhow, despite all the poppycock, the animosity, the headlines, the impeachment without a trial, despite everything, despite even my own death, I feel surprisingly good. And my confidence grows each day that soon enough you will know the full truth. Well, wait a minute. Now that I think of it, you never actually saw me die, did you? Conclusions can be so deceiving. Miss me?
Right after this video comes out, the anonymous person also dies, in which the family keeps it a secret as to what happened. And then the third accuser, which is Linda Culkin, she is hit by a car and is killed. So all three of Kevin Spacey's accusers are now dead. And he releases this video saying, kill him with kindness. So if I'm aware of this type of information here, what do you think Mel Gibson knows? What do you think Ashton Kutcher knows? What do you think Jim Caviezel knows? What would happen if these guys follow through and actually release a project? Because they're saying they're going to. That's an expose on this city. I think the world would be absolutely shocked. I don't know if they're going to do it as a documentary or if they're going to make a film they write or not. They haven't said yet, but I cannot wait to see what they will release. Hopefully it will do some good, because this is a weird town and there's a reason why all these studios don't want to carry the sound of freedom. I would love to know what you guys think. Also, if you have not subscribed to the podcast here, please do. Take just a few seconds and click the subscribe button below. And yeah, let me know what you guys think. I would love to know your thoughts. With that being said, I will be back soon with more. All the best.